Hello, everybody, and welcome back here with another BSN podcast here today. Today is Thursday, June 30th. Hope everybody's having a day so far and had a good rest of their day yesterday. It is, in fact, Thursday, June 30th here today. A lot to get to today in the podcast, coming off another night last night with a lot of baseball on, and that's kind of been the story of it, and that's kind of the story how it's going to be for the next couple months, and it's great because there's just baseball on right now, and that's really all that's on. So you've got a lot of baseball. You've got it all over different channels. I was watching the Phillies-Braves game last night. Braves were able to get the win there, but it was a great. It was a fun game to watch. It was a good game. The Phillies right now are it's a big series. It's an interesting team. The Phillies are just the fact that they are in position to possibly compete for a wild card spot, more on the outside looking in the division, but still in position to make some noise involving the playoffs. So these are some big games for them. Obviously, a team who fired their manager in the year and have been much better with Rob Thompson as the interim coach. Yankees yesterday were able to finish this sweep. Didn't start very well, 3-0 in the top of the first. Tyone was able to settle in, gave the Yankees some length. The bullpen came on, did their job, and yet again the Yankees come back from down 3-0, score 5 unanswered, 2-run homer by Judge, and a 3-run bomb by Stanton, and the Yankees got the win. So they sweep the A's, and as I said at the beginning of the week when the series started, I said this is a series you got to sweep. You cannot, 2 out of 3, worst case you lose the series, which I didn't see happening. You had to sweep them. It's the worst team in baseball. It's the worst record in baseball versus the best record in baseball. Best record in baseball should get the job done. And the Yankees did that, and they did it again yesterday. So they get the series sweep. And now, today, we have a one-game series in Houston. A one game today in Houston before we head back up to Cleveland to play the Guardians for 3 games starting on Friday through Sunday. So a lot to look forward to this weekend for the Yankees, but tonight you got the Houston game. Should be good. One game, kind of a tiebreaker game, if you will. So you got that. Mets took another loss yesterday against Houston. So it's funny. Both New York baseball, both Yankees and the Astros yesterday were in New York. Obviously, the Mets at Astros at City, Yankees in the Bronx. And so the Yankees left out of Newark, and I believe, what was it? What did the Astros leave at? Did they leave out of LaGuardia, I think, or something like that? I don't know. The airport close to Citi Field, I know there's one over there. So now, both the teams who were in New York yesterday now have to leave New York to go play in Houston for one game. So it's funny because this is because of the lockout. They're making up some of these games that were missed due to the lockout. But I mean, it's just like the logic just doesn't make sense. Both teams are in the same city. Now you got to have them travel all the way out west to go play one game for the Yankees to then go back up to go play Cleveland. So a lot of traveling for the Yankees in the next couple days. Mets did take the loss yesterday, and the Mets are struggling a little bit right now. They're hitting a little bit of a road bump. They played some good teams. They're struggling a little bit, and I think I'm going to get to it in my second topic. I think the biggest thing for the Mets is they need to get their aces back, and also their bats need to come alive because 2 hits yesterday is really unacceptable, and the bullpen's interesting as well. Mets have their fair share of issues. They can be solved. It's not like they have big glaring. I mean, they have some glaring needs, but they can be solved at the trade deadline. But it's just a matter of, do you really want to stretch it to the trade deadline? Because now the Braves are really starting to make some ground on the Mets. So we'll get to all that. But Mets have a day off today. They'll be playing the Texas Rangers tomorrow at home to start up a 3-game set over the weekend there. Yankees, like I mentioned, will play Houston today. Then they'll head to Cleveland for 3 starting tomorrow. So a lot of games coming up for both the Yankees and the Mets. All right, so let's get to the topics for today's podcast. A lot to get to today on the show. A lot of basketball news coming out of the NBA. We're going to start off with Dejounte Murray. He obviously got traded to the Atlanta Hawks, a massive trade in the world of the NBA, considering the fact that the NBA free agency is it starts today. Free agency starts today, and you have a lot of different moves. Harden opted out of his deal. Bradley Beal opted out of his deal. So you got a lot of different moves coming from all over the place in the NBA landscape. And a big move yesterday with Dejounte Murray getting traded to the Atlanta Hawks. I'm going to give you kind of my thoughts on this deal. It's an interesting move because you have an Atlanta Hawks team that just went from good to really good and a true, competitive team now in the East. And you have a Spurs team that kind of went from, building to taking a step backwards and really resetting with trading probably, I would say, their face of their franchise in Dejounte Murray. So Murray gets traded to the Hawks. Hawks get a big-time roster boost. We'll get to all that in the first topic. Second topic, like I said, going to get to Carrasco. He's been really struggling. And the big thing I've noticed this season with Carrasco is he's been very inconsistent at times. So I want to get to him, want to get to a little bit of his inconsistency this season, and in general, the Mets as a whole, because yesterday they blow that, they have 2 hits, and their bullpen blows it, and then again, and then you saw the other day with Carrasco struggling yet again. He's been very inconsistent this year, want to get to him, so we'll get to that in the second topic, and then we'll finish things off with the New York sports update. Yankees today, Mets day off. So, not a crazy amount going on tonight with the Yankees and the Mets. Yankees obviously 1 game in Houston. Mets a day off before they'll continue their homestand against the Rangers starting over the weekend. So with all that being said, this is the BSN podcast, and let's get right into it. So big time basketball news coming out of the NBA. And obviously as the offseason goes on, we're going to continue to see these moves. You obviously have free agency starting today. What's going to happen with Bradley Beal? The big news with Jalen Brunson and the Knicks. As we all know, that's a big storyline around New York and all that stuff with the Knicks and Jalen Brunson. James Harden opting out of his deal. They say he's going to sign a team-friendly deal with the Sixers to create more cap space and flexibility for them to go on and sign other players. So we'll see what James Harden does. We all know how he is, where he opts out of a deal, says one thing. We'll see if he actually, sticks to his word and signs a team-friendly contract with the Sixers. But the big news in the NBA today, and the trades obviously will continue to heat up, but we've heard the rumors over the past couple days, and that is Dejounte Murray traded to the Hawks from Spurs for Danilo Gallinari and multiple first-round picks. And I want to tell you something. Those first-round picks are unprotected. So this is a big-time deal for both sides. This is a move for organizations where you look at, and I've always said this whenever I talk about trades, signings, anything where a team gets another player and a team maybe gives somebody up. I've always said this, where there's a difference. There's those type of moves where a team goes from a contender to a little bit better. There's those type of moves where a team goes from bad to pretty solid in one move. And then there's moves where a team goes from maybe kind of, there's those moves where teams go from good to bad if they trade away and start to rebuild. This is one of those moves, could be a game-changing move for the Atlanta Hawks with the addition of Dejounte Murray coming from the Spurs. And the Hawks now, you look at their roster. You have Trae Young, you add Dejounte Murray, you already have DeAndre Hunter, you add him to the mix. You have John Collins now as well. Obviously, John Collins, the only issue with him is who knows if he's going to get traded. I know there's still some rumors around him. We'll see what happens. You have Clint Capella, Bogdanovich, and Kevin Huerter are your core guys on that roster. You have a good mix of young talent, a little bit of veteran talent with Clint Capella and stuff like that. He's kind of a veteran guy, been around a little bit, but still a guy that's got a lot of left in the tank. But this Hawks roster now is really young. You bring in a guy in Dejounte Murray who's going into I think he's like a 5th season or 6th season. He's still young. He's got a lot of talent. He's really just entering his prime, because if you look at his numbers, he's coming off of a career year last year and brings a good amount to the from a defensive standpoint. So you got a lot to like from this deal for the Atlanta Hawks, and a very good move for the Atlanta Hawks. Obviously, the Spurs are a team where now they go from really, the Spurs go from a team that was, building around Murray. They built the foundation. Murray was their guy, took him out of college, right? Now they kind of go to that from that standpoint of a team where it's building a foundation around Dejounte Murray to getting rid of their foundational piece and giving away to the Hawks. And now the Spurs are all over the place. Now you really got to wonder what is going on with the San Antonio Spurs, because they have completely now stripped down their roster. Got rid of Murray. They do get multiple firsts, but now the Spurs are completely entering a rebuild. And like I said at the beginning of the show, there are difference in moves where It takes a team from really good, really bad to really good. This is a move for the Hawks that propels this team from maybe a first-round exit to a team that can make some noise in the postseason. And I truly mean that. Because when you look at their roster now, it's complete. If John Collins stays put, you have a very young and solid big three with Trae Young, Dejounte Murray, and John Collins. Now, if John Collins leaves, you still have a lot of solid pieces. Trae Young and Dejounte Murray, two good offensive players. Murray can be that kind of playmaking guy. Very solid on the defense. Averaged 2 steals per game last year. Very good team now. And a team to look out for in the East. They're not just a 6-7 seed that is going to be kind of just get in and hopefully make some noise. No, they're going to be a team that's going to be in the conversation and for many years to come because they just continue. They're so young and they continue to build up with young talent like Murray. Now, with the Spurs, they go from kind of rebuilding to even further now down, getting worse from really rebuilding. And I really wonder why the Spurs make this move. And I understand, I get that they're rebuilding. They're trying to acquire as many draft picks as they can. But when you talk about rebuilding, I've always said this in sports, you need to build around. You got to have one guy to build around. Teams do it all the time, right? Build around that foundational piece, right? A lot of teams have that. Judge for the Yankees, built around him, right? The Nationals I've talked about with Juan Soto, build around him, put pieces around him. He's going to be your main guy, and then build around him, make sure you bring in solid talent. Even the Knicks, building around R.J. Barrett. The Pelicans did with Zion. Zion hasn't been healthy, but they built around Zion with pieces that fit his game, pieces that will work well with him. The Spurs have gone the route of not building around Murray, getting rid of Murray, and now you look at the Spurs and you look at a team right now that is now in a position where they really don't have that face of the franchise. I mean, Keldon Johnson's good. Lonnie Walker's good, or whatever his name is, Lonnie Johnson, whatever his name is. But is it really those foundational pieces? And now at Popovich is towards the end of his career, how long is he going to be coaching? The Spurs now enter a rebuild with a lot more uncertainty now without Dejounte Murray. Because with Murray, you at least knew that, look, you had a guy that was a solid piece for you, and you had a guy that, went out there, played very well, coming off a career season, continued to build around him, but they just traded away their foundational piece. And I understand they've acquired a ton of picks. But there's not much else on that roster to acquire those picks. But the Spurs now go from in a rebuild with a foundational piece to now deeper into a rebuild without really a foundational piece. And you have to hope if you're the Spurs now that one of those picks is their foundational piece. Because Dejounte Murray was that piece. Now he's gone. So like I said, a very interesting move. Because the Hawks get a lot better. And I don't disagree with the Spurs, what their thought process is. 3 unprotected first-round picks. You had Danielle Gallinari. I mean, Danielle Gallinari is a solid asset. Was on the Hawks for a couple years. A guy that's going to be brought in. We'll see what he does in San Antonio if he stays there. More of a veteran guy. We'll see. But still, you add him to the mix. But the Spurs are primed for a couple really, really bad seasons. Because they struggled when they had Dejounte Murray. And you look at what the Spurs have done. They've completely torn it apart. Got rid of Patty Mills. Got rid of DeMar DeRozan. Kawhi Leonard obviously has been gone for a long time. But he's out of there. Completely have stripped down. Now you get rid of Dejounte Murray. I mean, this is an organization that is completely tearing it up on all levels. And I really would assume that soon Greg Popovich is going to be kind of behind that, where he's going to retire and things are really looking towards the rebuild for the Spurs. And this is just entering a rebuild for San Antonio. And this is going to be a long rebuild because they don't have that number one guy in their roster right now. Keldon Johnson, yeah, he's solid, but he's not a guy that's going to lead a team. Dejounte Murray was capable of doing that if you put the pieces around him, and we saw what he did last year. I mean, he had a career year just entering his prime. So I get where people are saying, and that's why I see both sides of it. Like when you talk about who won and lost the trade, we're going to have to wait and see with the Spurs. Because right now, the Spurs roster is really bad. I mean, they have nobody. The Spurs roster is terrible right now. They have nobody. But they have a ton of draft picks, 3 unprotected picks in the next couple years draft. I believe one's 2025, 2027. So we're going a little deep, but still, those are draft picks for years to come. But right now, they have nobody really to build around. You're not going to build around Keldon Johnson. You're not going to build around anybody else on that roster, Devin Vassell. You're not going to build around those guys. You could have built around Dejounte Murray, but now you get rid of him. So I see where people are saying that the Spurs, in a way, won the deal with all the first-round picks. That's great, but they just made their rebuild a whole lot harder because now you got to hope that, because you don't have the pieces, unless if you trade away these first-round picks, you don't have the pieces to go out and acquire a star or acquire somebody else that's going to be a number one. You got to hope that one of your draft picks turns in to a solid asset for years to come. They had it in Dejounte Murray. They just got rid of it. So I love the move for the Hawks. It's kind of a wait-and-see game, in my opinion, for the Spurs. And in my opinion, a little puzzling. Because the Spurs, like, if they had Murray, if this year, if they kept maybe signed another guy, they could maybe be a little bit more competitive. But now they completely take another step back. And Popovich, with his with his coaching career kind of nearing its end, he's had a phenomenal career, as we all know, but with his career kind of nearing its end, you wonder how long he's going to be there. So if you got to go through another coaching change, I mean, just a really interesting situation in San Antonio right now, and completely tearing it up. And a team that's going to be non-competitive next year. And I'm telling you right now, if they go on and make the postseason, surprise everyone, that's great. But they are going to be non-competitive next year, saying it right now. And for the Hawks, they now look like a team that is going to be a pretty serious threat in the Eastern Conference. Trae Young, Dejounte Murray, DeAndre Hunter, John Collins, who we'll see how him and the Hawks play out. I know there was some rumors of him wanting out, Hawks trading him. Nothing has happened. So as of right now, John Collins is still a Hawk. And, if he is going to stay with the Hawks, I'm sure he's pretty thrilled about the trade because you're just adding another piece to this puzzle. Clint Capella, Bogdan Bogdanovic, and Kevin Huerter. And it's a balanced roster, too. You have Trae Young, Murray. Trae Young can be your playmaker. We all know what he's capable of. Murray's solid on defense. 2 steals per game last season. Had a good amount of rebounds, good amount of assists. A guy that, 21 points per game last year. A really solid asset there. Can play make a little bit at times as well. We know what John Collins is capable of. Brings that kind of physicality element, a solid scoring power forward. And then you bring Kevin Huerter to a mix with a guy that can hit a bunch of threes. So a very balanced roster. You got your rebounders with guys like Clint Capella, Hunter, and all them. Clint Capella specifically, your rebounder guy. You get your playmaking from Trae Young, you get your defense by Dejounte Murray, and you get your 3-point shots from Kevin Huerter. So a very balanced roster for the Atlanta Hawks. And like I said, a team that you got to watch out for. This is a team now, I really think, with this move, makes them a threat, much more of a threat than they were prior to this move in the Eastern Conference. And a team that I think can really make some noise now in the postseason. So Dejounte Murray traded to Hawks from Spurs for Daniel Gallinari and multiple firsts. The Spurs reportedly agreed to trade guard Dejounte Murray to the Atlanta Hawks on Wednesday in exchange for forward Daniel Gallinari, 3 first-round picks, and a future pick swap. So the 2025-2027 first-rounders are unprotected Atlanta first-round picks per league sources. Hawks also sent a 2023 first-round pick, which was via Charlotte. And then also we'll get a 2026 pick swap. So in reality, it looks like they'll probably get 4 first-rounders. 3 for sure. We'll see how that 2026 pick swap plays out. Teams are very, very hesitant to do this. They often fight for even top 1 protection. The Charlotte picked up middling lotto protected, but the rest is about as much as draft ethically, maybe more, as San Antonio Spurs could have anticipated getting. Even pushing to 2025, 2027, and not 2023, 2025 matters. Woj of ESPN reported the news. The Hawks were one of several teams negotiating trades with the Spurs for Murray in recent weeks as San Antonio seemingly embarks on a full-scale rebuilding effort. Rumors regarding Murray's status with the Spurs have been swirling for several weeks. The All-Star guard has even gone so far as to acknowledge the rumors on social media. San Antonio's motivation to move Murray seems curious at best. He's coming off a career-best season, posting 21 points, 9.2 assists, 8.3 rebounds, and 2 steals while playing stellar perimeter defense. The Spurs also have Murray under a team-friendly deal that will pay him $34.2 million over the next 2 seasons. While this is clearly the beginning of a full-scale rebuilding effort, Murray doesn't turn 26 until September and still will be well within his prime when the Spurs plan on competing again. That's what I'm saying, and they could have built around him. So I get all these draft picks. I get that. But you don't have anybody to build around. You're going to have to hope that one of these draft picks is a guy you can build around. And with I've always said this in sports. And I was talking to somebody the other day about this. There's risks. There's always risks and rewards to anything you do in sports. In sports, when you make a full scale rebuild and you rely on the draft, the high risk is your draft picks completely, just flop, right? But your high reward is you get 3-4 really young guys that turn into really big stars, and you're looking at multiple postseason appearances and probably a couple championships in the future. Right, it's painful getting there, but once you get there, it's really promising. I'm going through right now with the Jets. Last year was painful. It's been painful these past couple seasons, acquiring all this young talent, new coaches, all that stuff. It's very exciting now. We got a young quarterback. We got a young group. We got a lot of guys that have a lot of potential. It's exciting, right? But it's a lot of pain to get there, but it's exciting. You also could take the route of artificial talent, where the Nets are doing, right? You go out and sign big-time players, proven guys like Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and you want championships right then and there. You might win those, but down the road then you blow up all your draft capital and all that stuff to get those guys. And there's high risk, high reward to that too. The risk is that blows up in your face and you're looking at a rebuild for the next 5-10 years that you have no draft picks. And the Nets did that with Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. They stunk after that. They haven't been relevant since now, right? So, if Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving were to leave right now, Nets would be without a draft pick, first-round pick for the next 5 years, and they would have to try to navigate through a rebuild, which is impossible. So, but the high reward with that, the high reward is you win a championship or two with those guys. So we've seen that building super teams. So like I said, the Spurs, sure, there's that element of, the high reward. The high reward is you bring in a lot of guys, but you got to rely on your draft. It's definitely risky. These other teams have shown the Jets are building around Wilson, right? They haven't got to build around. Spurs don't really have that guy right now. Sure, they might get in the draft, but that's the high risk element. You would love to, if you were the Spurs fan, you'd probably love to go into the draft with capital and build around Murray. Not right now. You're kind of trying to find that franchise cornerstone, and that's hard to do. It's hard to do. So they're entering a massive rebuild with a lot at hand. So the 23 NBA draft features forward Victor Wembanyama, one of the most touted prospects in recent memory, and another potential superstar in guard Scoot Henderson. It's possible the Spurs feel they would be too good with Murray in the fold to have a realistic shot at landing a top 2 pick. So they're basically tanking is really what's going on here, which is, I guess it is what it is. But the Spurs did make the play-in this year. It's funny as it sounds, they did. But I don't know. It's a little puzzling to me because they were competing right now with Murray. Like they got to the play-in, right? They were competing at least. If they just built around him a little bit more, they could start to compete. Now they're just entering back into another. It's a little puzzling. That said, the fact the Spurs were in position calls into question their team building strategy of the last few years. There were calls for the franchise to begin its rebuilding stage in 2018 when Kawhi requested a trade. Rather than take a package of picks and young players, the Spurs instead chose a package highlighted by DeMar DeRozan, who allowed the team to remain competitive but stuck in the purgatory of mediocrity. The Spurs made the playoffs in DeRozan's first year with the franchise, but were ousted in the first round before failing to make the postseason each of the last 3 seasons. It's fair to argue the Spurs never would have been in a position to need to trade Murray if they chose the correct path 4 years ago. There is also a matter of whether 73-year-old Greg Popovich has the stomach for a rebuild that will likely take him into his late 70s. As far as the Hawks go, this is a no-brainer. Murray fills two of the team's biggest needs, perimeter defense and ball handler, who can help take the load off of Trae Young's shoulders. The Charlotte's first-round pick is protected picks 1 through 16 next season, lottery picks through 2025. It can't even get the Spurs in the Wembana race. The two Hawks first-round picks project out of the lottery for the foreseeable future, bearing series of injuries or falling out with Young. As it stands, Atlanta gave up 3 picks that project to be in the late teens to mid-20s and veteran expiring contracts for the 25-year-old All-Star. It's nothing short of a home run. I mean, it really is. Like I said, the Hawks got this. It's a great deal for the Hawks. And for the Spurs, there's a lot of puzzling things. And this article makes a great point, going back to even the Kawhi Leonard trade. They could have been maybe now in a position to compete with Dejounte Murray, where they could have been a young team with a lot of promise. But, and that's where franchise, like I said, every move for a franchise is going to affect you some way or another. Right? The Nets, I always go back to this. When the Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett net trades went down, we were, everyone was like, all right, we're going to compete now, but that's great. But once they left, the Nets had, 5 years about rebuilding with nothing. Terrible seasons, finishing, near the bottom of the Eastern Conference. So I'll tell you this, to be real, and I understand where people are coming from, where you're like, okay, the Hawks have a ton of draft capital. That's great. But is that draft capital really going to come through? And you just traded away your franchise, kind of face of the franchise. You just traded away your best player. And a guy who was young. This isn't like you're trading away some 35-year-old that's still really good and kind of, still a solid player that you can get pieces for. No, this is trading away a guy who is still in his 20s, still got just entering his prime of his career. You just traded away. So it doesn't really make much sense. And that's why, personally, as me, I don't like the deal for the Spurs. I get a little bit why they did it, and not really. I don't really get it. I understand what they're trying to do. But they're doing it now without a true cornerstone, without a true foundation. They're going to have to try to build their foundation through the draft, which is extremely hard to do. So, just not a great, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just trying to think, really, what, I don't know. Either way, I'm done talking about this because I think I've gave my opinion many, many times on this. I think I love the move for the Hawks. I don't really like the move for the Spurs. But look, Spurs now enter into a long, long rebuild. And you got to wonder now, really, where they go with Popovich, how long he, is going to be coaching for, how much longer. But the Hawks get much better, and the Spurs definitely get worse. All right, so let's get to the next topic here today. We're going to get to Carlos Carrasco. So the New York Mets right now are in a little bit of a slide, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying that the season's over for the New York Mets, but I do want to point out some struggles, specifically with pitcher Carlos Carrasco. So the Mets lost yesterday 2-0. They fall to 47-29 on the season. And they had 2 hits. They had 2 hits yesterday. It's not gonna get the job done. It was it was bad. It was a really bad game. I wasn't watching it, but I was following. In between innings of the Yankees game, you look at the score. 2 hits is not gonna win you a ball game unless if it's 2 solo shots and your pitching completely shuts down the door. 2 hits isn't gonna win you games. Taijuan Walker pitched great yesterday, 7 1/3. Looked like he wanted to go a little bit longer. Buck took him out. And, then the bullpen blues it. Drew Smith, in the what was it? I think the 9th inning, or was it the 8th or 9th inning? It was something like, I think the 9th maybe, allowed a home run to a guy that was batting in the 100s, but below the Mendoza line, and the Mets lose. So, the Mets find themselves in a situation where they just got swept by the Astros. They got 4 games they played against them. 2 in Houston, and then 2 in New York. They got swept by them. So, a really good Astros team took care of business against the Mets team that is supposed to be one of those top-tier teams that is supposed to be really good. And now for the Mets, it might be a little bit of a reality check. Because, and I'm not saying that it's going to be I'm not saying it's a panic and, oh no, this is bad, we stink, all that stuff. But a But uh, but anyway, I wanted, just like, it's not. I'm not saying it. They're going. I'm not saying it's. The Mets fans should be in a panic mode where it's like, oh no, season's falling out of hand. Do something fast. Trade for all these guys, and let's turn this thing around. No, it's not that. But it is a position where it is time of a reality check for the Mets, and maybe a little bit of a reality check in terms of what they need to do at the deadline, what they need to address at the deadline. They're pitching, and really, that the fact that Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom need to come back sooner rather than later, because their pitching, and specifically their bullpen, continues to blow games, continues to struggle, especially against really good teams like the Houston Astros. And Carlos Carrasco has been, bringing him in last year was a solid asset. Brought him in the Lindor trade. Didn't pitch that much last year. Only pitched in 12 games. His ERA was rough. He didn't play much. ERA struggled a little bit. Just was not a great season considering the year prior in 2020. In the short 2020 season, he made all of his starts and had a 2.91 ERA. So had a really good season there. But as for last year, really struggled. 6.04 ERA and really kind of struggled. And for a guy that's career ERA is 3.92. So he's always been a solid pitcher. Obviously, his whole career was in Cleveland all the way up until 2020, and now this is his second year with the Mets. And now, yet again, he is showing a lot of signs of inconsistency with the New York Mets. And yet again, we're starting to see it where he has a good game, really bad game. A couple good games, really bad games. And that cannot happen if the Mets are going to want to go far in October. You can't have inconsistent pitching against the Dodgers. You can't have inconsistent pitching against the Brewers. If you run into the Braves during the postseason, they're another team too. You can't have inconsistent pitching against, especially teams like the Brewers, where you have really good starting pitching. And their pitching's going to be consistent, and their pitching's going to be really solid. But the Mets right now, specifically Carlos Carrasco, find yourself in a hole where you don't know what you're going to get out of Carlos Carrasco, and it's as if the Mets rotation is running out of gas without Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom. So here's Carlos Carrasco's past couple games. We'll start in June. 5 innings, 4 hits, no runs, no homers, 5 walks, 5 Ks. He threw 95 pitches that game against the Nationals, 3.63 ERA. That was his first start of June against the Nationals. His next start was also very good. Now, let me mind you, that first start in June, he was coming off a start where he allowed 5 runs against the Phillies. So he struggled in that start. First start of June was good. Second start of June, 7 innings, 5 hits, 2 runs, 2 earned, 10 Ks was great. Maybe his best performance of the season. That was against the Padres. Then against the Angels, he struggled. 9 hits, 5 runs, 5 earned, 7 Ks, 4 2/3 was bad. I believe that was the game Jared Walsh hit the cycle. We struggled in that one. Then the next one against the Marlins, he was better. 6 1/3, 8 hits, 3 runs, 3 earned, a homer, 7 Ks. All that. Now, in that Angel game, he allowed 2 home runs. 7 homers he's allowed in the month of June, and he's pitched in 6 starts. So that's allowing over a homer a game, which is really, really bad. And then back-to-back Houston starts have been really bad. His first start in Houston, which was the first time, 2 1/3, 4 hits, 5 runs, 5 earned. And then the other day, when they lost 9-1 on Tuesday night, 6 hits, 6 earned, 4 strikeouts, 3 walks, a homer. And by the way, in the other start against Houston, 3 home runs. And a guy this season who finds himself, which is not good, he's allowed this year 10 homers. All of last season, he allowed 12. He's already allowed 10 this year. Now, he's always, and you look at his other seasons, where in Cleveland, 21 homers. That's the most he's allowed in a season. He's already at 10. And you still have all of July, all of August, all of September. His season stats, 8-4, 4.85 ERA, 81 strikeouts, and a whip, all the way up to 1.33. And you got to wonder if this is just going to be the Mets version of Carlos Carrasco. Because I think there's still a lot of Met fans that are waiting for him to kind of return into his old form. Look, the guy's 35 years old. He might just be running out of gas a little bit. This might be kind of the new version of Carlos Carrasco where he's going to be inconsistent. He's going to be that pitcher that when he's out there and he's pitching well, he's going to do very good. But he's also going to have bad days where he can't even get out of the third inning. And you look at his starts in June, like I said, to really just simplify it. He had good start, bad start, good start, 2 bad starts in a row. That's how inconsistent. It hasn't been good. All right, it was and then good. It's been good, bad, really bad, decent, really bad, good, really good, bad. It's all over the place. All over the place. And this is where the Mets and Max Scherzer had a good outing yesterday in AA with the Rumbling Ponies for a rehab start for his second, says he's good to go, should be ready to pitch in 5 days. Mets need their aces back because they're starting to run out of gas without Max Scherzer out there, and Jacob deGrom will come shortly thereafter. But I mentioned Max Scherzer because deGrom hasn't even pitched this year. So he hasn't even pitched this season. He hasn't thrown a pitch since last year in July. So it's almost a full year since deGrom's thrown a pitch on an MLB mound against an MLB batter. So in a live game. He's thrown BP, I know, but he has not pitched in a live game since July of last year. So I mentioned Max Scherzer more so than I do deGrom because deGrom hasn't even pitched this season. So it's not like deGrom's been dominant this year and then got hurt. He hasn't even pitched this year. We got to see what deGrom is like coming out of the injury. I'm sure he'll be good, but let's see if he can stay healthy at least for a couple starts in the season. And I truly mean that. I like deGrom a lot, but you got to see what he can do if he can actually stay healthy. But Carlos Carrasco, extremely inconsistent. And you can't have this going into October. Because if you go into the postseason and you have pitchers and a pitching staff that's inconsistent, that's really concerning, especially for a team that's bats have cooled down a little bit recently. Got 2 hits yesterday. They scored 1 run the day before. I know they were going up against Justin Verlander, and then the day before, they only had 1 hit or 1-1. I understand that. But when the bats are cooled down, you need your pitching to at least, and look, Taijuan Walker showed up yesterday. Taijuan Walker was the only reason that game. If Carlos Carrasco was on the mound yesterday, that would have been a 10-0 just absolutely domination by the Astros. Taijuan Walker pitched well. Carlos Carrasco's got to step it up. And the inconsistency just cannot continue to happen, especially come postseason. So he's got to figure out a way to turn it around because there's been some, and you wonder if the Mets maybe, move him to the bullpen or if they decide to do something else, bring in another pitcher. I know they want to bring in another bat, but you'll see what they do there. That's all trade deadline stuff. But Carlos Carrasco, the inconsistency from him this season is getting to a point where, in a way, it's really, it's not just all right. He's getting better. He'll just this is extreme. This is becoming a real issue for the New York Mets. Is the inconsistency from Carlos Carrasco. And the talent's there, like he's shown it over his years, but you just wonder, 35 years old, he probably just isn't the same pitcher he once was. So that's what I got on Carlos Carrasco. Mets lose again yesterday, 2 straight losses now, 4 straight actually, I meant to say, against the Astros. And, for Carlos Carrasco, really inconsistent, and you got to wonder, how much longer can the Mets continue to take this from him? Where every 5 days you don't know what you're going to get. You're either going to get a 10K performance where he shuts down a good offense like the Padres, or you're going to get a performance where he can't even get out of the 3rd inning, or he's blaming a check swing call as the reason why he pitched bad. That's concerning for the New York Mets. All right, so let's get to the rest of the sports today. You got the Guardians, Twins, Phillies, Braves, Brewers, Pirates, Rays, Blue Jays, Cubs, Reds, Mariners, A's, and Dodgers, Padres. Yankees, Astros as well. Yankees come into today's game 56-20. Astros come into today's game 47-27. Yankees got Severino on the mound. Sevy takes the hill today. He's 4-2 with a 3.38 ERA. And the Astros have Luis Garcia on the mound. He's 5-5 with a 3.68 ERA. Over-under set at 7.5 today, 6:10 Eastern on Yes. And as for fantasy baseball, I made a decision. And I still have to make another one. But I'm currently winning in my main league 123-114. And in my other league, I'm winning as well. 146-141. I also made a move today in my other league. I put Kenley Jansen on the IL and added Taijuan Walker as one of the pitchers. In my other league, I've got Joe Musgrove going today. That's it. In my main league, I don't have anybody pitching today. But I made a decision. So I'm winning right now 123-114. So it's close. And I've got nobody pitching today, but I've dropped Gene Segura, put him right on my watch list. So he'll be on my watch list there, waiting to see how all that plays out. So I dropped him. I put Kenley Jansen on my IL. So now I have Harper on the IL, Scherzer on the IL, and Jansen on the IL. I picked up Gregory Soto, a reliever, for Jansen. And in Eflin, I'm hoping Scherzer comes back in 5 days. I can put Scherzer in, put Eflin on the IL, and stretch it out a little bit longer to see how long I can go with keeping Eflin on. Because Eflin, hasn't been bad. He's been solid. So that's what I might do. I also might just drop Eflin, bring in another pitcher, but then I got to bring in another pitcher, then I got to drop 2 pitchers. And if those, then it creates a little bit of a tough decision making for me. So that's what I plan on doing. I'm trying to package Jose Berrios in a trade. I've been trying to. It's been terrible this year. Somebody offered me a trade. Comment down below if you think this is a good trade. So somebody offered me a trade. I give them Christian Vasquez, who has actually had a really solid year, but he's my backup catcher, so I don't play him very often because I have JT Realmuto. Then I have Jose Berrios in the trade, and he would give me Jerickson Profar, who is batting .246, 50 runs, 8 home runs, 38 RBIs, 4 stolen bases. He's got 201 points. He's 7th for his position rank. First base, outfielder, second base. So it gives me some depth. And he will also give me Noah Syndergaard, who is 5-6, 47 Ks, 3.86 ERA, 1.18 WHIP. Not a huge Syndergaard fan, but I don't think, I would give him Berrios for Syndergaard straight up. Personally, I would do that. I don't really want to give up Vasquez just because, Realmuto has been good this year as well. I just don't know if I really want to give up Vasquez because he's a solid asset. And, if knock on wood, this doesn't happen. But if Realmuto would to go down, having Vasquez, a guy who's batting .291 this year as my backup catcher, is really good. But, I'm looking at his lineup. I would never get Yu Darvish from him. I might be able to get Shane McClanahan's not happening. He's got some good pitchers. He's got some good pitchers on his team. Might be able to get, I don't know, it's tough. He's got some good pitchers. Chris Archer hasn't had a bad year either. He really hasn't had a bad year. Syndergaard would probably be my only bet. Syndergaard's got a 3.86 ERA. The thing with Syndergaard, he's not the pitcher he once was. He's just not going to load up the points. He averages only 9.6. So he's not going to load up the points much. This guy is DeGrom. Wonder if I could get DeGrom from him. If I could get Jacob DeGrom from him, and then I'll really be good to go. I'm looking to trade Berrios, and I put on my, because Berrios has been terrible, and it's been disappointing too because he was like, there's so much promise with him. 5.86 ERA. Jeez, and he's coming off a start where he only lasted 2 2/3 and had 8 runs earned. Just a really poor season for him. Could just be very well a down year, and that happens. And he might just be in the midst of a down year, so I probably should trade him now because if he's just not going to get better, then it's going to hurt. But anyway, that's going to do it for the podcast here today. Another good podcast in the books. As always, I will see you all back here tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.